Cody said, turning smartly on his heel and following Obi-Wan towards the lift. Admiral Yularen forwarded a transmission from General Skywalker requesting assistance on Teth. Then we'd better make our way there at once, Commander. What's the report from Christoph Sith? Obi-Wan asked as they stepped inside the lift, Kaz settling in his customary spot between them. Better than it could have been, General. And I already had plot a course we got underway the moment your shuttle docked, Cody said, sounding weary. I don't think we'll need to stop and pick up new troops, although it was close, sir. What do you think, Cody? Should we? Obi-Wan asked, crossing his arms and letting his left hand rub on his chin. No, sir. So long as we come out of this next engagement with minimal casualties. Cody answered. Force presence suffused with the grim realities of command. Keep me appraised, Commander. Obi-Wan said as the lift opened, depositing them on the bridge. Admiral Yularen was there via hologram, his blue visage easily visible over the central holotable. Admiral Yularen. Are we ready to get underway? Yes, General. We will meet you in hyperspace along the way, the Admiral said, standing in his usual pose of parade rest. We are ready for whatever awaits us on Teth. Good to hear. We will be seeing you shortly. Of course, sir. Resolute. Out. Obi-Wan didn't waste a moment, turning to Hap. It had been a few hours since he'd last had contact with Anakin, and the Force was urging him to contact his fellow Jedi. Hap, can you get me through to Anakin? Hap nodded and went right to it. Yes, General. Just give me a moment. Kaz wandered up next to him by the holotable, watching the lights pulse with the connection pending light. You think something is wrong, Master? No, not quite. Obi-Wan said, contemplatively. I do think there's some new information to be had, however. Good or bad, sir? Cody asked, coming up to his other side, his usual spot to Obi-Wan's right at the holotable. Neither. The table lit up before Cody could respond. Connection established, General. Hap called out. It was not Anakin that appeared in the middle of the holotable, but rather one of his lieutenants, Jesse, if Obi-Wan remembered correctly. General Kenobi. What can we do for you, sir? Hello, Lieutenant. Is Anakin anywhere near you? He's just inside the monastery, sir. Jesse answered quickly. Do you want me to send one of the men to go get him? Yes, please, Jesse. Obi-Wan moved the fingers of his left hand as he talked, his right tucked up under his arm. Yes, sir, Jesse saluted smartly, then turned, issuing orders to some troopers in the background. A few short minutes later, the vague forms of Jesse and his men in the background were replaced with Anakin and Ahsoka, the latter of which was clutching a small huddlet in a backpack to her chest. Obi-Wan took a moment to look them both over, noting they seemed relatively unharmed, if perhaps a little bit more stressed since their last communication. Obi-Wan, Anakin greeted. Are you finished with negotiations on Tatooine?
Yes, we are on our way to join you on Teth as we speak.
I see you've managed to rescue Jabba's son, Obi-Wan pointed out, resting the fingers of both hands on his elbows comfortably. Yeah, we got him, but we had to fight through a bunch of separatist droids to do it. I'm sure they're the ones that took him. I'd lay money on this being some scheme Count Dooku cooked up, Obi-Wan. Anakin said, right hand moving through the air as he spoke. That does seem likely. Obi-Wan agreed lightly. Probably, he's manipulating Jabba to gain control of the hyperspace lanes that Jabba owns. Master Kenobi, we have another problem. This interruption came from Ahsoka, her young eyes wide with concern. This huddle is very sick. Anakin breathed out a heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. It's getting worse pretty quickly. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it back to Tatooine in time. This whole rescue may backfire on us. I still don't think dealing with the Hutts is a good idea." Obi-Wan sighed and steeled himself for the fight that had the potential to break out. "Anakin, you know they control the shipping lanes in the Outer Rim. Jabba's cooperation is crucial to the war effort. If you let anything happen to his son, our chances of a treaty with him will disappear." Anakin opened his mouth to snap out a response, but was interrupted by Ahsoka, who was pointing up towards the sky. "Master, looks like we've got trouble." Rex's voice sounded from somewhere out of frame. "Defensive positions." Both Kaz and Cody stiffened at that, and the high-pitched whine of a ship's engine coming through the connection. Obi-Wan lurched forward, one hand reaching out towards Anakin's blue form. "Anakin, we'll have to call you back, Master. We're under attack. We could use a little help here if you have the time," Anakin said quickly, leaning forwards towards the comlink on his end. "I'll get there as soon as I can." Obi-Wan said firmly, "Protect the Hutt, Anakin." At that, the connection cut out. Obi-Wan sighed and leaned forward, bracing his palms on the edges of the holotable, staring down into its deactivated depths. "It appears once again that we are on our way to rescue the Fiber once." He pushed off and turned, issuing orders to the bridge officers. "All available power and speed to the hyperdrive. We need to get to Teth as quickly as possible. Hap, notify Coruscant of our current situation. Cody, call the section chiefs to the briefing room. We need to go over our plan of attack for arrival." A chorus of "yes, sirs" echoed throughout the bridge as everyone jumped to their assigned tasks. Obi-Wan turned on his heel and headed for the lift to take him down from the bridge and to the first main level of the ship, where the briefing room was located, Cody and Kaz following close behind him. The journey was quick, and Kaz had to scamper after them down the hall as Cody and Obi-Wan moved with a purpose, his own short legs making the cadet almost have to jog to keep up. They were the first to arrive in the room, and Hap had helpfully uploaded a map of Teth space into the projector in the middle of the table, which was already open and displaying. Obi-Wan moved to his usual spot, one chair away from the head of the table, Cody settling on the opposite side like he always did. On their very first full briefing in this room, Obi-Wan had made the deliberate choice to leave the chair at the head of the table empty, instead sitting across from Cody like equals. It had had the desired impact, and it was now their tradition. Kaz wandered idly around the room, inspecting the different pieces of audiovisual equipment, leftover data pads from a previous meeting, and stopped by the large picture view port that was open to space, showing the cyan and purple swirls of light-speed travel. "I've never been in here before," Kaz said, his back still to them. He was standing with his hands clasped at his lower back, feet apart, and staring straight ahead. His armor was still shiny and clean from their trip in the shuttle, and his Padawan braid hung neatly, secured with a band they'd gotten from supply. His hair was straight and fluffy. The fade going up from his ears and neck had started to grow out, and he looked like he needed a haircut. The longer hair on the top was pushed forward, except for the front, which was spiked upwards. Obi-Wan had the thought that he needed to get his apprentice a bead or two to commemorate his first battle and his first mission. "We'll have to get you a tour of the ship after this," Cody said, leaning back in his chair in easy small-talk posture. "We didn't have time before we landed on Christophsis," Kaz said with a small laugh, head shaking slightly. "It feels like it was months ago, but it was only a few weeks. Yes, it does seem longer than it was." Obi-Wan agreed, sharing a rueful look with Cody across the table. Kaz turned away from the window, walking around the head of the table to sit at Obi-Wan's right. He set his hands on top of the table and laced his fingers together loosely. "I don't feel the same as I was when I first came aboard. I can't even hardly remember that version of me. I think it's safe to say you changed the most, Obi-Wan rested his own hands on the table and turned his head to look at Kaz. You need some beads for that braid, Padawan. You've earned them. Beads? Kaz asked, giving Obi-Wan a curious look. Yes, as you go through your training and pass certain milestones or accomplish something significant, it's represented by the presentation of a bead to add to your braid. Obi-Wan leaned back in his seat, hands sliding a little on the table, but remaining still and open. Oh, wow. And I earned some? Kaz's eyes went a little round, and his eyebrows bounced in surprise. 3, to be precise. Obi-Wan replied with a smile. 1 for the beginning of your Padawanship, 1 for your acts of courage on the battlefield, and 1 to commemorate our first mission as master and apprentice. Whoa, Kaz breathed. They're like paint on armor, Cody said, chiming in from his seat across from them. Yes, very similar actually. Obi-Wan made an agreeing motion at Cody. And speaking of paint, Cody's grin turned a little bit smug. I have a bottle of 212th gold and some brushes with your name on it, kid. You more than earned your colors over the last few weeks. After we rescue Rex and General Skywalker, you can work on painting your armor. Kaz just sat there gaping at both of them in shock. His Force presence was just as open, gawking at them, just as much as Kaz himself was. He closed his mouth with a sudden snap, gulped, and blinked rapidly, fingers twisting against each other on top of the table as he tried to process what he'd been told. I think we broke him, Cody, Obi-Wan said, smirking at his commander. I think so, General, Cody agreed, smirking right back. He chuckled and gave Kaz a look. You okay over there, kid? I get Jedi things and Vode things? Kaz choked out in hopeful disbelief. Of course, Obi-Wan answered. The Jedi still send out their younglings to their home worlds for culturally significant events, such as rites of passage or a coming of age. And we have our own ways to commemorate such things. Getting a bead and painting your armors certainly qualify. Armor painting is Mandalorian, Cody said carefully, a strange sort of challenge in his eyes. We aren't Mandalorian. No, you aren't. Obi-Wan replied, locking eyes with Cody and rising to the challenge. But your culture is based on and derived from it. Kaz is part of that culture. I see no reason to deprive him of it. It was Cody's turn to flinch in shock. He hit it well, but Obi-Wan could tell his casual acknowledgement of the clones having things that were uniquely theirs startled him. Cody's surprise was gone in a blink, replaced with his usual placid calm. You're right. Our culture is based on it, just like our language is based on theirs. Kaz earned his colors just like any other shiny in the battalion. Quite so, Obi-Wan said with a smile. Obi-Wan felt like he'd just unwittingly overcome some hurdle that he hadn't even known existed until that moment. He'd just taken for granted Cody's involvement with Kaz as a role model for the cadet to follow, incorporating that into his training plans, and not realizing Cody himself was unsure of that place. Obi-Wan had quite handily assuaged Cody's fears without even meaning to. Perhaps he needed to speak with Cody to make sure there were not any more hidden landmines that he thought his non-verbal actions had diffused. Cody was prevented from responding when the section chiefs all began to file into the room, arriving later than them by dint of not being as close and having to get the notification. Heavy artillery, infantry, starfighter pilots, landing craft pilots, medical, administration, and ship's engineers, all sections walked in within moments of each other, grabbing their usual seats at the table with friendly banter and camaraderie. Oh, hey, Vodika, Helix said, being the last one to sprint into the room. He claimed the empty seat next to Kaz, like it had been left open for him. And General and Commander? Helix, Kaz smiled widely. I haven't seen you since yesterday. Yeah, well, I was busy, Helix said with a shrug. Good to see you in good spirits, Captain. Obi-Wan said genially. I saw you a few hours ago, kid. This came from Waxer, who was next to Cody on the other side of the table. Kaz laughed and waved at him mockingly. Hi, Waxer. All right, time to get to work. Cody interrupted their fun, and the mood in the room went instantly from cavalier to focus like a switch was flipped. Every VOD in the room straightened up in their chairs, chins up, feet flat on the floor, and eyes attentive. Cody had barely moved, hadn't even raised his voice, but he had instant command of the room with hardly any effort at all. He looked over the assorted faces, doing his own head count, then looked over at Obi-Wan and nodded. Floor's all yours, sir. Obi-Wan had the fleeting thought that he was the only Nat-born in the room, but that he certainly did not feel like it. Not like the last time they were all gathered together here. He could sense it in the air, feel it in the way the troopers' force presences leaned in towards him like they did to each other. Tucking his smile away to examine at a more private moment, Obi-Wan waved his hand and triggered the map in the center of the table, pulling up the update that Hap had just sent to it. Gentlemen, before you is the most updated information from the Resolute. It appears Torrent Company has engaged the enemy in an abandoned Bomar monastery. Getting troops on the ground to relieve them is the priority, followed by securing the skies in and above Teth. Obi-Wan paused, cycling through the different maps and views that Hap had provided them. It goes without saying to expect heavy resistance. So, battle plans, suggestions? The floor is open. Commander Oddball was the first to speak up. Sir, I recommend sending the fighter squadron in first, clearing the way for the LAATs to land. I don't think we'd be able to press through that and have enough numbers out the other side to aid Captain Rex and General Skywalker without it. Obi-Wan nodded, crossing his arms and letting the fingers of his left hand run along his upper lip. Yes, I agree. I'll fly with you to help locate General Skywalker and the Huttlet. Getting Jabba's son off planet is unfortunately the mission objective. Of course, General. Squad 7 is always glad to have you with us. Oddball sent him an easy grin back. I'll get my men ready and our birds fueled up for deployment, General. This was Captain Osprey, LAAT Flight Chief. We've got enough still functional here on board that we didn't land on Christophsis. Thankfully, most of what we lost there came from the Senator's battalion. Let's stagger the approach, Waxer interjected. He and Cody shared duties as infantry chief. Cody had many other responsibilities as marshal commander. So while he was in charge on paper, in practice, Waxer took many of those duties from him. Send in Ghost first, then follow it up with Dragon and Viper. If we need it, we can call on Hydra and Chimera. They took the biggest beating on Christophsis, sir. Good idea. The Resolute already has some forces and heavy artillery on the ground. Hopefully, we won't need any more than those 3 companies. Obi-Wan nodded. He looked down at Kaz, considering, then back to Cody. Cody, take Kaz with you on Osprey's gunship. Cody's grin was sharp. His agreement rang out in the Force. Yes, sir. I'll pack myself, Patches and Splint onto that gunship with you, Commander. Helix said. Kix could probably use the backup. And if they are calling for help, there's probably a decent amount of wounded men that need medical. I'll staff the rest of the landing craft with one of my guys each. The patients in the infirmary are stable enough to leave with just a skeleton crew. You have your seats, Cody said, after a brief eye-contact conference with Osprey. I got a look at the ground around the monastery. I don't think landing any more heavy equipment there is a wise choice, General. This was Commander Boxer, the large, bulky trooper that ran herd on all their tanks and ground assault vehicles. He had a large cannon painted down the left leg of his armor in gold and a completely shaved head. There's no room to maneuver. We're more likely to dump our stuff off that cliff than be useful. I'd appreciate the firepower, but you're right. And it looks like Anakin managed to crash a few of his tanks around the entrance besides. Obi-Wan gestured out with his left hand and his lips twisted ruefully. I had noticed that, sir. Cody spoke up for the first time. He stared intently at the map. I think that would be a good drop zone. The tank provides enough cover. They're likely gathered around it. Ghost will aim for it and use it as our LZ. Yeah, I like it, Cody. Osprey agreed. There's enough room we could come back and do strafing runs, hit them with some air-to-ground shock and awe, and clear the path for Dragon and Viper. Do it. Any further questions? Obi-Wan said after a brief silence. When none were forthcoming, he turned to the engineering and admin sections, the two that had not yet spoke. Captain Trace, Captain Forge, ship status? Captain Forge spoke first. He was still covered in some grease and dust from the ship systems, his armor smeared with it a little as well. He had a simple regulation cut, and the basic pattern of the 2/12 on his armor. I can give you a bit more juice, sir. We'll get to Teth within the hour. Best to take it slow wherever we go from there, though, General. Let us do some routine checks on the hyperdrive before pushing it again. Will do, Captain. Trace? Systems green on my end, sir. We're handling coordination with Coruscant Command and the Resolute. I'll have Hap send the update on our ETA and get the rosters out of all troops assigned to the rescue effort. Helix, I need you to send me your supply count for the infirmary still. We need to get that request out for Bacta and bandaging supplies ASAP. Captain Trace, by contrast, had longer, shaggier hair that fell about his ears and a facial tattoo of 3 lines along his right cheek in black. Unlike the rest of the room, he was in his dress grays and not armor. Splint is collating it. Should be in your inbox before we break Atmo. Helix answered easily. All right, gentlemen. I'm satisfied. Obi-Wan said, looking at each chief around the table. Any reattacks or alibis? No, sir. Cody answered for the men. Then this meeting is adjourned. Jete cara verde. Obi-Wan pushed away from the table and stood. As he did, Cody shot to his feet at attention and bellowed out, Room 10 Hut! Around the room, everyone pushed back from their seats and snapped to attention with the loud and singular sound of plastoid cracking against plastoid in perfect unison. Obi-Wan took a brief quarter of a second to admire it before responding. Carry on and dismissed men, Obi-Wan said, easy grin on his face, like a bubble popping. They all relaxed, going back to laughing and talking like the interruption had never happened. Oh yeah, sir, Osprey and Oddball called over from their end of the room. Hey, we'll stunt those clankers back to the Stone Age, Waxer said, catching his right hand in a punch with his left. Gotta rescue poor Rexica again. This was chuckled out mockingly by Helix. He looked over at Cody. How does he survive without you, sir? Not well, it seems, Obi-Wan answered for him as they made their way out of the room, throwing the comment out over his shoulder. I don't know if it's all his fault. Kaz jumped to Rex's defense. I feel like General Skywalker might be slightly to blame. I would entirely agree with you, Obi-Wan said solemnly. He survived ARC training all on his own without our help, Helix, Cody said to the medic, shaking his head at him. Rex will be fine until we get there. I wouldn't say all on his own. We were in the same class. Helix pointed out as they moved towards the lift, but we got shuffled into different squads. The trainers split up Rex and I on purpose. If he could survive that, we'll pull his ships out of the fire on Teth before he even starts to get singed. Cody said, arms waving in the air as he spoke. This got Kaz's attention, and he looked over at Helix. You're an ARC trooper, Helix. Why don't you wear the armor? It's terrible for carrying medical equipment. That big shoulder pauldron gets in the way of my field pack, and the comet tends to collect blood. Helix said with a shrug. Kaz's mouth made a little O of understanding. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. I'll meet you in the hangar, Commander. I need to grab Patch's splint in my kit, Helix said, waving to them as he turned down a different hallway, headed for another part of the ship. See you in 30, Helix, Cody called to his retreating back. Yes, sir. Those that needed to be in the hangar crammed into the lift with Cody, Kaz, and Obi-Wan, the others splitting off to go to their assigned sections. After that, time dissolved into a flurry of preparations. Vode running back and forth, ferrying items, checking equipment, loading gunships, priming weapons, fueling starfighters, and generally getting ready for yet another planetfall offensive, fresh off the last one. After this, Obi-Wan resolved to take a day or two of leave somewhere to give them all time to decompress, catch up on sleep, and eat something that was not a ration bar. Kaz jumped right into the work of prepping Osprey's LAAT for ground assault, easily following commands, loading equipment, and helping Osprey work through the pre-flight checklist. Cody and Waxer went through rosters, checked rifles, grenades, heavy machine guns, and made sure Ghost Company was all systems go. Before long, they found themselves in orbit around Teth, having met up with Admiral Yularen and the rest of the fleet on the way. The Resolute was already in atmosphere, keeping near the monastery but trying to stay out of the way of the enemy dropships and troop transports. As soon as they had the green light, Commander Oddball, Squad 7, and the General were zipping out of the hangar, intent upon clearing the way and wreaking maximum havoc on the droid army's air support. Obi-Wan and Kaz had said a brief goodbye before the older Jedi had climbed into his starfighter, R4, in the astromech seat. As General Kenobi left, Cody jogged over to Osprey's gunship, Kaz trailing after him, helmet on and goggles resting on top of it. Osprey had the cockpit open and was still fiddling about, tweaking dials and getting things just so. He leaned out and looked down at Cody and Kaz. We should be heading out pretty quick, sir. Cody nodded, reaching out carefully with the Force, trying to feel for the General's position. He could sense intense focus and concentration, but nothing alarming. Seemed like he was going to plan. Yeah, probably. Oddball and the General will clear the way for us. Kaz idly flicking open and then closing the clasp that kept his blaster in its holster before Cody's vambrace started to beep, indicating an incoming transmission. Osprey didn't even need telling. He closed the cockpit and started the engines, causing a chain reaction down the line. Cody hopped inside the dropship, Kaz stepping up and grabbing a hold of his utility belt to keep himself steady. Cody answered the transmission. We're here, General. Good. Send in Ghost Company. Yes, sir. Cody cut the connection, then banged on the bulkhead behind the pilot's seat. Go, go, go. Slamming shut with a clang, the bay doors closed and the ship lurched into action. The red drop lights flickered on, and the troopers inside swayed with the motion of Osprey's piloting. Kaz unclipped his lightsaber from his belt and clenched his left arm tighter around Cody. They were going to cable down so Osprey could get back into the fight and lead his squad on strafing runs as fast as possible. Booming echoes of artillery fire shook the ship, but they still circled down, and suddenly the overhead light was green and the bay doors were hissing open. Kaz looked down at the ground that was some 50 feet below them, reined in his fear, called on the Force, and jumped with Cody as the commander leapt from the ship. Kaz hit the ground the same moment he ignited his saber and spun through the air, deflecting blaster bolts back at the droids, providing cover for Ghost Company as they stormed the monastery. Pressing out with the Force, he spotted his master and Rex up closer to the door. "Master's up that way," Kaz pointed, green saber flicking back and forth, as the Force warned him of incoming fire. He felt Master Obi-Wan tug at him through the bond. "And he wants me over there." "Go, kid. We got this," Cody said, rallying the men to him and then charging for the largest gathering of droids. Kaz nodded, taking off at breakneck speeds towards Master Obi-Wan, sliding up behind him just as he joined Captain Rex. "Where's Skywalker?" Obi-Wan asked, deflecting fire away from Rex and the men gathered near him. "Best guess is he's still inside, sir," Rex answered in between returning fire. "Master!" Kaz grunted, blade whipping back and forth like a green blur as he sent blaster bolts back at the enemy lines. "Ah, Kaz, there you are." "Hey, kid," Rex greeted distractedly. "Hey, Rex. Captain, Cody is here somewhere. Keep the droids occupied. Kaz and I will go find Anakin," Obi-Wan said, motioning for Kaz to follow as he darted towards the door. "Copy that, sir. I'll link up with the commander. Good luck." Kaz sprinted after his master and they ducked under the half-open door to the monastery, depositing them into a dark hall that was very reminiscent of Jabba's palace. Immediately, Kaz felt like something was not right. Oily, sickly, sticky air seemed to cling to his cute and his exposed skin under his goggles and hands. It felt like something was dying, or maybe screaming out in rage. He did not like it. "Master," Kaz said, only to come to an abrupt halt when twin red lightsabers ignited down the hallway. "Obi-Wan, Kenobi!" A feminine voice echoed down from ahead of them. It was a tall woman, with pale skin, dressed in white and gray, bald and sashaying towards them calm as you please. Always chasing after Skywalker. So predictable. "Oh, but wait, what's this?" The chuckle that came from her lips sent chills up Kaz's spine. "An apprentice. My, replacing Skywalker already?" Obi-Wan felt every muscle in his body freeze, locking up like stone, his pulse galloping in his arteries, sweat starting to bead in his hairline and trickle down his back, breathing kicking up to a rapid staccato. Ruthlessly, he shoved his terror out, away, and into the Force. She was here. She was here. Kaz was here. He could do nothing but make sure the boy made it out alive. Only onward. Pulling his lightsaber from his belt, Obi-Wan ignited it, bathing their side of the hallway in a cerulean glow. Kaz took his cue from his master and did the same. Emerald blade held down at his side. "Anakin does what he pleases. But I somehow always seem to find you scuttling along in his wake, Ventress." Obi-Wan spun his blade and slid smoothly into his Soresu-ready stance. From the corner of his eye, he saw Kaz take up his Beskad ready. Ventress laughed, entirely unbothered by this. "Well, let's see how well your new toy holds up. Take them!" 2B2 droids began advancing on them, and Ventress darted away deeper into the monastery. Kaz sent their own fire back at them, destroying one droid while his master sliced the other in half. Truly, Kaz longed for his own regular lightsaber. He gave the training one in his hands a dubious look, hoping it would at least be enough protection to not get him killed in this fight with the Sith. Obi-Wan didn't linger, taking off deeper into the building. Kaz right on his heels. They came into a large open room, and that dark feeling from before seemed infused into the very air they were breathing. Kaz closed the door on his mental escape pod, but kept the viewport open, allowing him to still feel and use the Force. It had taken ages for him to figure that out. "Come now, Ventress." Obi-Wan wheedled, voice echoing off the stone pillars in the chamber. "Hide and seek? I can sense your frustration. I know you're here." He walked a little further in, lightsaber swinging. "Let me guess, you're after Jabba's son too?" Kaz felt a zing of move race up his spine and tucked into a roll just as Ventress came flying down from above, snarling, both of her crimson blades held aloft and aimed right for where he had been standing. She hit Obi-Wan's bright blue blade instead, hissing and spitting like a murderous loth cat. Trading blows so fast it looked like a dance, Ventress hit out at Obi-Wan, but he pushed her back, sending her skidding along the tiles just as Kaz popped to his feet in ready stance. Blade spinning, Obi-Wan was in his preferred fighting form. Blade above his head, parallel to the ground, left hand out, 2 fingers pointed at the enemy. Ventress sneered, threw her cloak at Obi-Wan, tangling him in it, and then launched herself at Kaz. Criff. Kaz blocked her blades, eyes wide behind his goggles and both hands on the hilt of his saber. He could feel his arms shaking from the force of her blow. "I wonder what he would do if I killed you." Ventress purred at him over their locked blades, leaning incrementally closer as she put all her weight into the press of her blades. "Get off," he growled back at her, trying to shove back and not gaining an inch. Kaz slipped his blade down and away, causing Ventress to overbalance into the press she'd been using on him. He ducked in close with the momentum, remembering how well it had worked on his master that first time, and elbowed her square in the jaw, causing her to reel back with a shout of pain. He jumped back and pulled his blaster just as Master Obi-Wan dived into the fray, taking advantage of her distraction. "You'll have to do better than that." Obi-Wan growled at her, red blades locking with blue. Spotting an opening, Kaz took a few hasty pot shots at Ventress. The first 2 went wide, but the third grazed her along her left arm as she was too distracted by Obi-Wan to dodge them all. Yowling in pain, she shoved Obi-Wan across the room and towards a pillar with the Force. Expertly he pivoted, flipping in midair to land gracefully on his feet like a tuka. Unfortunately, Kaz's shooting had the opposite effect, and it focused her ire directly on him, a Jedi with a blaster. What sacrilege! Her eyes narrowed and she truly focused on him for the first time. For the first time. That armor, Obi-Wan. I am impressed. A clone? Huh. I didn't know that vermin could become Jedi. How the mighty order has fallen. Stay away from him. Hurling himself forward with the Force, Obi-Wan slashed an attack aimed for Ventress's shoulder. She blocked him quickly, and they were off once again. Only this time, Obi-Wan found himself playing even more defensively than normal, as every chance she got, Asajj Ventress would try to move for Kaz, who was still peppering her with well-placed shots from his blaster. He'd learned very well how to fire around Obi-Wan during their campaign on Christophsis, and was putting that knowledge to extremely good use now. Obi-Wan could tell his constant firing was causing Ventress's frustration to skyrocket. "Oh, what's the matter?" Ventress cooed as they locked blades once again. Her sneer was lit by the crimson light of her lightsaber and accentuated by the trickle of blood coming from the side of her mouth from when Kaz had hit her. "Do you care for that abomination?" "How touching." With a yell, Obi-Wan shoved her back, ending the blade lock and launching a flurry of attacks, flipping over a swipe she took at his feet and sending his own back at her neck. Rapid fire, lightning quick, their blades danced, the swipping hum of lightsabers filling the room, bouncing eagerly from the stone walls. Suddenly the air was punched from Obi-Wan's lungs when Ventress landed a solid kick to his sternum, knocking him off his feet and landing him in an undignified sprawl on the stone floor, his saber rolling away from him with an agonizing clatter. He only had a brief moment to feel the Force howl out his despair when she launched herself at his apprentice once again. Kaz, miracle that he was, tucked into a perfect somersault, summoned Obi-Wan's fallen blade to his left hand, clipping his training blade back to his belt with his right in the same motion. Then springing up, blue blade ignited in his hands, swinging for Ventress's unprotected right arm. The Force was with him, and he connected with her lightsaber hilt, causing her to screech and drop it in a shower of sparking, melting metal. Ventress didn't even pause. She just swung back, lone blade aiming for Kaz with deadly accuracy. Using his short height to his advantage, Kaz ducked under her attack, the red-hot fire of her blade singeing the top of his helmet black, and stabbed out with a perfect Beskad kill strike aimed for her heart. Fumbling a block, Asajj stopped the cadet from killing her, but not from throwing her back with the Force. As she sailed through the air, Obi-Wan called his saber to himself from Kaz's hands and dived after her. Their blades locked again in the hissing spit of sabers, the light where they touched turning purple. "What's the matter, my dear?" Obi-Wan grunted out, baring his teeth at her. "Having trouble killing a simple Padawan?" "No!" she shrieked, forcing Obi-Wan off her and slicing at him in a blur of red light, a howl of inarticulate rage following in her wake. Trading blows like strobe lights, Obi-Wan pushed her back towards the pillars, trying to corner her in the room. All the while Kaz was at her again with his blaster, not giving an inch. She shrieked again, then abruptly launched herself into the air, escaping up into the next level of the monastery. She didn't even turn to look at them as she ran, the blood-red glow of her blade fading as she sprinted farther away. Had Kaz not been there, Obi-Wan would not have hesitated to give chase. But Kaz was there. Way! So he did not. He was not Qui-Gon. He would not leave his apprentice behind. Turning, Obi-Wan deactivated his blade and strode the few paces over to Kaz, who was panting heavily. Blaster held out in front of him in a steady two-handed grip. The rest of him might be shaking, but the muzzle of his pistol didn't so much as waver. Obi-Wan's sheer relief rippled out from him in the Force like a physical thing. Just a black, smudged burn to Kaz's helmet. That was all she had managed to inflict on him. Obi-Wan didn't even hesitate. He just clutched Kaz to himself tightly, blaster and all, uncaring of how the cadet's helmet was digging into him uncomfortably. The fine tremors running through Kaz's muscles slowed to a stop as he just stood there, breathing in the calming scent of Obi-Wan's robes. Pounding footsteps caused Obi-Wan's head to snap up and his arms to tighten even more around Kaz, only to relax as the familiar form of Cody pelted into view. Swiftly, Cody made a beeline for them, skidding to a stop next to Kaz, making a pained noise at the black pockmarks on the top of his helmet. Gloved hands reached out, fluttering over Kaz's neck and shoulders, assessing for further damages. "He's all right, Cody," Obi-Wan said quietly, voice rough. "She didn't hit him." "That was Ventress?" Cody asked, head snapping up to look at Obi-Wan from behind his helmet visor. "I wasn't sure who it was. I thought it was Dooku. I couldn't tell. This would have been very different if it was." Obi-Wan's words hitched, almost catching in his throat at the thought. Dooku would have surely killed Kaz, and likely them both. Lucky indeed. "Okay," Cody breathed out, hands still on any part of Kaz he could reach. "Okay." Suddenly, Obi-Wan looked up at the sky, the view blocked by the stone ceiling of the monastery, and smiled. "Anakin has just jumped to hyperspace. He got away with the hut." "Yeah," Cody mumbled, not even caring about that information. His attention was entirely focused on Kaz. "Kid. Kazika?" "Lek," Kaz muttered, not moving from where he was snuggled against Obi-Wan. "Garjate? Adika?" Cody said, right hand on the back of Kaz's neck, squeezing gently. Yeah, Kaz said softly, his shoulders lifted almost to his ears with an inhale, and then sloped down with a long exhale. After, he pushed away, still inside the circle of Obi-Wan's arms, but with enough distance to turn his head and look at Cody. Cody,
When did you get here?
I could feel your panic, Cody said by way of explanation, the vocoder in his helmet making his voice sound clipped and harsh. I made sure Rex was going to be okay, and I ran in here. Intending to do what? Obi-Wan asked flatly, eyes flinty. I don't know. Something, Cody burst out, left hand slicing through the air emphatically. Shoot the bitch, maybe. I don't know. Don't argue, Kaz snapped, shoving away from Obi-Wan to glare at both of them, hands on his hips. And don't take your fear out on each other. I can feel it. Both Obi-Wan and Cody shifted guiltily from foot to foot like chastised younglings. Cody recovered first, consummate professional that he was. You're right. Besides, Rex needs our help to mop up the rest of the droids outside. We better go. I thought you said Rex was all right. Obi-Wan asked as they turned and started to speed walk towards the door. Yeah, for a few minutes, but not permanently, Cody said, quickening his pace to a light jog. Obi-Wan bit back a sarcastic comment that almost escaped his lips, and they burst out into the night of Teth. Red and blue flashes lit up the dark, illuminating both friend and foe alike. Kaz's emerald blades split the dark like a signal flare, and he jumped into the fray, dodging shots, flicking them back, and working his way over to Rex, Cody, and Obi-Wan following, the Master's own water blue blade twitching back and forth as he defended his aliot. Jumping up, Kaz flipped over the head of a B-2 droid, landed on his shoulders, shot it point blank with his blaster, and then leapt off, landing with a small woof of air right next to Rex, who was still dug in by the downed tank from earlier in the day. Obi-Wan and Cody skidded up after him, Obi-Wan bisecting two more droids on his way over with barely a flick of his lightsaber. General, did you find General Skywalker? Rex asked, ducking back into cover, twin blasters tucked close by his bucket. Anakin has left the system. Obi-Wan answered, he's on his way to Tatooine. Our deal with the Hutts is in his hands now. Soon as we mop up here, we need to rendezvous with him.
Copy that, sir.
The battle was quick after that. The dropships in orbit pulled out in the face of the overwhelming firepower of Obi-Wan and Anakin's combined fleets. And, with Ventress's retreat, the droids were leaderless and confused, easy pickings for the much more organized and motivated troopers of the 501st and the 212th. Cody and Obi-Wan shelved their argument by mutual agreement and scheduled it for later when Kaz was passed out asleep in his room on the negotiator and could not witness the two of them tearing strips off each other. Rex picked up on the tension, but like a good soldier, he said nothing, continuing to give commands and fight like nothing was amiss. Kaz was tired, starting to flag and recovering from his first exposure ever to the dark side of the Force. Obi-Wan had not prepared him, nor been prepared himself to face Ventress or anyone like her. It had been an entirely uncomfortable and unaccounted for surprise. The longer the war went on, the harder it seemed to be to pick out Darksiders lying in wait for them. This trend disturbed Obi-Wan, but there was not much he could do about it. Not even Cody's sharper, fresher Force senses had noticed anything amiss before it was too late. Whatever it was that was shielding the likes of Ventress and Dooku from them, it was powerful and frighteningly effective. And now, the opposing side knew about Kaz. That thought made him feel like bugs were crawling under his skin. But there was nothing Obi-Wan could do about it now. Before the end of the night, there was a mass of sparking parts of droids littering the monastery, and the gunships were swinging around and picking them up, ferrying the fighters to their appropriate ships. Obi-Wan took Osprey's gunship back up with Cody and Kaz, his own starfighter having been returned to the ship by R4. They landed and disembarked, and when they did, Obi-Wan felt the leftover tension of the day drain from his shoulders. All they had to do was pack up, then get en route to meet with Anakin and pick him up. There was no other mission, no fight to run straight to. They could just take a breath and take a moment to appreciate the peace and quiet of the ship. The after-action report was concise and to the point, nothing having gone on outside of the plan for once. Kaz spent the meeting steadfastly staring straight ahead, goggles on the top of his helmet and eyes blinking slowly as he forced himself to stay awake through sheer stubborn will. Meeting adjourned, Cody went off to see about the ship's business while Obi-Wan escorted his Padawan to his quarters for that nap he'd been asking for the last day. Kaz reached up his left wrist, a dent chip flashing the door lock green, and he all but staggered inside, Obi-Wan following quietly behind him. Kaz pulled off his armor and his boots, placing them carefully on the top of his footlocker and stacked neatly by his helmet. His lightsaber went to the small shelf built into the wall by the head of the bunk, and Kaz collapsed onto the bed, blinking blearily up at Obi-Wan, who stood near the door while all this took place. "Master?" Kaz asked, eyes already hazy with sleep now that he was able to relax. It was a several-hour journey to Tatooine, but Kaz didn't need to be awake for the pickup of General Skywalker, so he'd likely sleep much longer. "Are you all right, Kaz?" Obi-Wan asked softly, grabbing the small chair from under the desk and placing it next to the head of the bed before sitting in it lightly. Kaz heaved a sigh and yawned, one sleepy fist coming up to cover his mouth. "She terrified me. I thought I was gonna die. She wanted to kill me." "Yes, she did," Obi-Wan said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. "And she would have, had she the opportunity." I could feel the dark side all in that room. Kaz's voice was rough as he started to drift off against his will. It poisoned everything it touched. She oozed it like blood. Yes, it was certainly strong there. Obi-Wan agreed. I wasn't expecting it. Neither was I. Next time, I don't think I'll be so startled. Next time, I'll have a real lightsaber and not just a blaster. Yes, you will. We'll go to Elam at the soonest available moment. It has been moved to the top of my to-do list, Padawan. Today has certainly cemented that. Good. You did well, Kaz. I'm very proud of you. You fought well. Thank you, Master Obi-Wan. With that last mumbled phrase, Kaz was lost to the land of dreams, breaths evening out and deepening, Force presence settling into that low-toned hum of idleness. Obi-Wan watched him breathe for a long moment, burning the image of his Padawan safe and whole and alive to the backs of his eyelids before standing, putting the chair back and then silently slipping from the room like a moving shadow. He stepped out into the hall, noting the lights had been dimmed for the ship's night cycle. He looked up and spotted Cody standing in front of his door, bucket gone, the top half of his armor missing, and his arms crossed over his chest. Obi-Wan sighed. He motioned to his door. "Please, Commander, come in." Cody opened the door and stepped in before Obi-Wan. He walked over to the desk, pulling out the chair he always used with deliberate movements. Sitting down, he lifted his right leg up and rested his ankle on his left knee, crossing his arms over his chest and regarding Obi-Wan with hard eyes and a blank expression. Obi-Wan resisted the urge to sigh. So it was to be like that then, he thought. He cleared his throat. "Tea, Cody?" Cody genuinely thought it over before nodding. "Yes, thank you, General." Obi-Wan went about the business of making his first cup of tea in 3 weeks, the soft clink and scrape of drinkware, the only sounds in the room for a few long minutes. Finally, water boiled and leaves steeped. Obi-Wan placed a steaming hot cup on the desk in front of Cody and took his own seat. He took a sip and eyed the commander over the rim of his mug warily. Cody's presence in the Force gave nothing away, just the Beskar-Hard's spiny shell that it was sometimes when didn't want anyone to know what was going on inside his head. Even his presence down their bond was muted. "Well, Cody, the floor is yours," Obi-Wan said after about a quarter of his tea was gone. "I want to be angry, but I can't." Cody said after contemplating the liquid in the cup between his hands. "We had no idea she would be there. You weren't even looking for her. You were looking for General Skywalker. It was safer inside. No blaster fire, no droids. It was the right choice to take him with you." "Yes, those were my thoughts exactly," Obi-Wan said, taking a careful sip of his still hot tea. "I know. I could feel them," Cody answered. He blinked down at his tea before taking his own sip for the first time since he picked it up. He looked up and locked eyes with Obi-Wan. "He doesn't even have a real lightsaber, General. It wasn't even a fair fight." "No, it wasn't," Obi-Wan whispered. He set his cup down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But that didn't stop him. You should be proud of him, Cody. He fought well, didn't give in to his fear. At one point, he wound up with my lightsaber and destroyed one of Ventress's own. He hit her in the face and made her bleed." Cody's fingers went slack around his mug, and he had to set it down before he dropped it. "What?" "Yes, she had him in a blade lock and he escaped and elbowed her in the face. She must have bit her tongue because she was bleeding from the mouth after," Obi-Wan said, pride shining through the fear in his voice. His fingers clenched around the soothing warmth of the half-full cup in his hands. "Kaz hit a Sith assassin in the face?" Cody marveled with a shake of his head. "And destroyed one of her lightsabers? And shot her with a blaster and lived to tell about it?" Obi-Wan pointed out idly. "He fought like a Mandalorian. She wasn't expecting it. Mando Carla Dinila Ad." Cody breathed, taking a sip of his tea for something to do with his hands, eyes staring off into the middle distance vacantly. "Yes, very." Obi-Wan agreed. He sighed. "Not that I think he would have survived on his own, but he certainly put up one hell of a fight." "Yeah, sounds like he did," Cody said, head snapping up and eyes coming back into focus. "He needs a real lightsaber." "Yes, he does. I have plans to go to Ilum at soonest available opportunity. The moment the fleet can spare us, we will be gone." Obi-Wan answered, eyes locked onto Cody and hands gently curled around his tea. "Good." Cody nodded, then leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, regarding Obi-Wan with sharp eyes. "But I'm still concerned about you. That gap he exploited to hurt Ventress is in your technique too." Obi-Wan sighed wearily at that. "Yes, I know. The Mandalorian fighting style is effective against lightsaber wielders. You said that was how he fought. He got up close, got into her guard, got inside the reach of her saber, and made it hard for her to swing at him like she wanted," Cody said, his words starting to come faster and faster as he spoke, his eyes locked with Obi-Wan's. "Kaz is hardly a fully trained Verd, but what little Colt was able to teach him was enough to save his life. Imagine someone who was fully trained with the Force and a lightsaber of their own." Obi-Wan let that thought hang in the air and roll around in his brain a moment before replying. "Yes, I can see how that would be highly effective." His sharp blue gaze pinned Cody to his chair. "You have an idea?" "I might," Cody said slowly. "I said I was going to teach you Beskar. I sense a but." Obi-Wan prompted, taking a sip of his mostly empty tea mug. Not quite. Maybe an and. Cody rubbed a hand over his mouth, legs slipping from his knee to plant both feet on the floor as he leaned forward. I could teach you both how to fight like Jango Fett. I got lessons directly from the man himself. I was his favorite for a while. If there's anyone in the Gara who knows how he fought, it's me. And then, I suppose, unleash this upon the galaxy and defeat Count Dooku and the Sith. Obi-Wan said mildly, not against it, but not sure if it would be quite what Cody thought it would be. If a half-trained cadet could hit Ventress in the mouth, destroy her lightsaber, shoot her and then live to tell about it later, I don't think that idea is too far-fetched. I would say he's a little more than half-trained. Obi-Wan argued idly. He only had 3, maximum 4 more years of the program left, didn't he? True. Cody acknowledged. But still, General. No, I agree with you. I was just playing devil's advocate a little. Obi-Wan set his now empty cup down on his desk with a light clatter. I'd already planned for you to teach Kaz, Cody. That was never a question. Cody looked startled at this revelation.
Sir?
I knew the moment you put your hand on his armor in the transport up from Kamino that we would be doing this together. The Force willed it, Obi-Wan said, laying all his cards on the table, following the thought he had earlier at the mission planning session in the conference room. It did? Cody asked slowly in disbelief. Forgive me, General, but I was under the impression that once someone decided to walk the path of the Jedi, they were required to forsake all else.
No attachments, right, sir?
You're partially correct, yes. Obi-Wan answered honestly, and for most of those initiated into the temple, that is entirely correct. But there are a select few beings and species that still interact with their home systems and culture in some positive way. Togrutas, Sarians, Keldor, and others all go back to their home worlds. And, for a Mandalorian example, Tare Vizsla. I know, of course, that Kaz is not Mandalorian, but the comparison is similar enough to suit. This whole time, He cleared his throat and looked up at Obi-Wan. I thought I was going to have to let him go, to back off, step away. One day when he's grown and he becomes a knight, we will both have to let him go. Obi-Wan said with infinite gentleness, but I had hoped you'd take that journey with us, Cody. Cody huffed out a startled laugh, falling back into his seat and staring at Obi-Wan dumbstruck. This whole time I was worrying over nothing. I'm sorry. I had thought my actions spoke for themselves. Obi-Wan crossed his arms over his chest and gave Cody a contrite look. But it came to my attention that perhaps words might be more appropriate. Yeah. That would have helped, Cody said with a light scoff. He shook his head, then crossed his own arms. It would have saved me a lot of worrying, sir. I do apologize, Cody. It was not my intention. I never thought it was, General. I didn't think the Jedi would let me be, would let Kaz be so attached. Cody's expression was hesitant, earnest. You really want to do this together? Obi-Wan's left hand came up to stroke his beard, regarding Cody seriously. You will raise warriors. The Force had told him that day on the LAAT. He hadn't had a chance to think about it, to really pull it apart. The 3 of them were bound together, fate sealed tight by the Force bonds that resonated between them. It was unlike anything Obi-Wan had ever felt before. And once again, all around him, the Force echoed with Cody's words, his honest intentions, his desire to be there for Kaz, for Obi-Wan, to do right by them. Cody started to shift anxiously in his seat, his Force presence sharpening into that spiked ball it did when he got defensive and emotionally uncomfortable. So like his commander, to hide his own emotions by striking out at others in a perfect distraction, the dread radiating out from him, and the sheer panic at the thought that he'd pushed too far, that he'd ruined everything, hit Obi-Wan down their bond like a wave. "Peace, Cody," Obi-Wan said, unable to take the raw hurt that had started to bleed out into the Force. He stood a little, grabbed his chair by the seat, and dragged it so close to Cody that when he sat down again, their armored knees were touching. He grabbed Cody's wrists and held them tightly, fingers on Cody's pulse points, thumbs on the backs of his hands. Cody's skin was warm against his gloves. "Aye, General?" Cody blinked at him, confusion overriding his anguish for a moment. His amber gold eyes were wide, hope starting to bleed back into them. Obi-Wan's lips twitched up in a brief smile. "The Jedi like to pretend that we are above such things as families, but in truth, it's a blatant lie. Our lineages are our families. You! It would be hypocritical of me to deny that same right to you when I've so obviously taken it for myself." Cody's shoulders sagged in relief, moving down from where they'd started to try to climb up to his ears, the movement more pronounced than normal because he wasn't wearing the upper half of his armor. He laughed a little. "Thank you." "Of course, Cody." Obi-Wan replied. His smile turned sly in an attempt to lighten the mood. "Besides, I believe you told him you would help him paint his armor?" Cody smiled, obviously revisiting that memory. "I did." "That will be a good bonding moment. I'm given to understand that is a significant event." "It is." Cody's smile widened, and a sudden cast of the boldness that had been starting to peek through lately took over his features. "You should be there and help him, too." "I wouldn't want to, and true, you wouldn't," Cody hastened to reassure. "And if it would make you feel better, I could be there for when you give him his beads. A mutual cultural exchange, if you would." A slow smile spread across Obi-Wan's face, and his fingers around Cody's wrists tightened briefly. "I like the way you think, Cody. I accept, so long as you do." Cody's wrists slid easily from Obi-Wan's hands as the commander bid his general good night and headed to his own quarters, feeling much lighter than he had when he had arrived. Obi-Wan watched him go, staring idly at the door as it closed in his wake. Perhaps those feelings he'd tried to release to the Force were more stubborn than he first thought, and it appeared reciprocated. That would complicate things. Deciding to think on it another day, Obi-Wan moved to his desk and settled in to work on the data pads that had started to pile up in his absence. Captain Trace and the admin crew had done a marvelous job, but there were just some things the general had to sign off on. He let the simple monotony of reading through and authorizing requests take over his mind until their arrival on Tatooine.